Welcome to CAMEO's third Thursday webinar on a Wednesday. Yes, I do realize that it is Wednesday. Today we're talking about California and small business policy, what you need to know. You are in listen only mode, so if you are interested in raising a question, you can type it into chat. I will be monitoring the chat, so feel free to do that. My name is Heidi Pickman. I am the VP of Programs and Policy, as I mentioned before. And just a little bit on our agenda, what we're going to be doing today. We are going to be talking about legislation that we passed in 2018, a little bit about the California Consumer Privacy Act. I just want to make sure everybody knows about it. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jesse Torres and his team to talk about the SBDC program for restaurant and retail, some pending regulations, and then we'll have some announcements. Thanks. To go right ahead and move on, talking about some of the major legislation that we passed in 2019. AB 857 created public banks, and that will improve access to capital for small businesses. I do know that San Francisco and LA are planning on creating a public bank. I am not the expert, so if you are interested in learning more about what's happening with public banks, please type public bank into the chat, and I'll make sure to connect you with the CAMEO members who are involved in that. Thank you, Star. And then the other piece of legislation that CAMEO supported this year that was kind of one of the bigger pieces, put a rate cap of 36% loans from $2,500 to $10,000. Many of these are used for small businesses. We've found in our experience with some of the very micro businesses that a lot of business owners act like consumers. They mix their personal and their business finances pretty easily. So we decided to come out and support this rate cap. California was one of less than 10. I can't remember exactly how many states that did not have a rate cap, and 36% rate cap was one of the highest. I do know that Texas has a rate cap. I think it's in the 20s or something like that. So it was something that CAMEO has been fighting for responsible lending, and we thought was really important. And then a couple of other pieces of legislation I just want to make sure everybody knows about. If you could type veterans into the chat if you serve veterans, because there were two pieces of legislation that passed that will help veterans. One was AB 230 to ensure disabled veterans are treated fairly in state contracts, making sure they're going to get their contracts. And then AB 498, which eliminates business license fees for veteran-owned businesses. And then I did want to point out another piece of legislation that, because CAMEO has been working on the cottage kitchen laws, and that one this year that passed was to expand those to include home-cooked meals. What it is basically an opt-in program for counties. So you can pass a law, it doesn't mean it's going to happen. One of our members, the Cook Alliance, is working very diligently trying to get counties to sign on and opt into the program. So far, Riverside County has opted into the program. Solano County is going to vote early January, as well as Alameda County. We don't know when in January, but Alameda County is going to vote in January. The word is that they're very excited about the program, so hopefully those counties will pass it. And then San Bernardino and San Francisco are interested. Counties are a little gun shy. They kind of want some other counties to go ahead and experiment first, and when they see what happens, with those, they'll hopefully take it on. I do know that in Riverside, there's 30 home cooks that have registered for the home cook program, and approximately, well, I don't know how many meals have been made, but I've been told hundreds, and without incident. Everybody's worried about there being a public health incident. So that's kind of exciting because we've been working on the cottage kitchen issues for quite a long time. I want to talk about CAMEO's scorecard. This was something new we did this year. And I'm going to just share with you what it looks like, just so you can see a little bit of what it looks like. This was the first time that we did this. CAMEO examined the voting records of all 119 legislators on 16 bills that were voted on. Not all of them passed. On key issues of concern to our 4 million small businesses. We included committee votes, floor votes, authorships, and co-sponsored, and we measured if a legislator voted in favor or against, as well as the no recorded vote. So we had that separate. If they didn't vote. If legislators received 80 percentage points or more, then we ranked them. And those with less than 80 percentage points need to do more next year to earn a ranking. And our goal is to encourage the elected officials to stay true to their word and support small and micro businesses. And I'll just give you a little peek at what it looks like so you could see the recorded, no recorded votes. And I'm happy to send this link around. I'll post the link into chat right now for you all. And you can download the scorecard for yourself. Go back to. So it was our first time. Just a little bit of summary of results. Lawmakers got high marks. 76% of assembly members and 80% of state senators earned a score of 80% or higher. 34 assembly members and 21 senators achieved perfect or near perfect scores. It was very bipartisan. There was bipartisan support for 13 of the bills we looked at, and we're looking to refine it next year. This was the first time we did it, so we didn't really tell beforehand that we were going to do it. So we're going to make sure that everybody knows that we're doing it this year. And we also, I want to let everybody out here know that if you have a bill that you're watching, to please let us know about it, and we can include that if we feel it's appropriate in our scorecard. And then just to let everybody know, the people who didn't rank, a lot of times they didn't rank because they missed a vote, or they either missed a vote or did not vote on purpose. We don't know whether that's the case, which is the case. So that was a really exciting project for us, and we're excited to do it again. And then I just wanted to mention the California Consumer Privacy Act, just because it goes into effect this year, and I hadn't heard of it until I attended a bigger event, and I want to make sure that just everybody knows about it. We're not experts here at CAMEO on this. It's going to apply mostly to larger businesses. You could see it applies to companies that have annual gross revenues of 25 million or greater, or have 50,000 people on their email list. It's probably a bigger company than we are. Most of our members are dealing with, but if you are interested in this and want to know more, please, you can either email me, hpickman@cameonetwork.org, or I'll post my emails at the end of this webinar, or you can respond to the email, the follow-up email we'll get. or you could type your name in and I'll connect you with more resources for this. The intentions of the act are to provide California with residents with the right to know what data is being collected about them, if their personal data is sold, let people opt out of being having their stuff sold, those kind of things, anything you think would be like what you want to happen with your data. And the fines are pretty hefty, $7,500 for an intentional violation and $2,500 for unintentional violations. So if your customers do happen to have a large email list or earn money from selling data or whatever it may be, please make sure that they know about this and they comply, and we can put you in touch with some resources that can help you. I would like to now toss the rest of this webinar over to Jesse Torres. Jesse sits on the CAMEO board, and we're excited to have him become our president this year. He's also the principal of Arroyo West, and he can tell you a little bit more about the work that he's doing with the Northern California Small Business Development Network.
Awesome.
Take it away.
Thank you, Heidi, and kudos to you and to the team for all your hard work on advocacy. You know, for those who don't know Heidi, she's one of the hardest workers you'll ever meet, and I know the Scorecard took a lot of effort on behalf of her and her team there at CAMEO. My name again is Jesse Torres. I'm the principal for Royal West. We're a small micro enterprise consulting firm based in LA, and yeah, but what I'm going to do for the next couple slides is just talk a little bit about the Northern California Small Business Development Center Network and an initiative that we're helping to co-administer with my friend and colleague Sid Barakra, who also has his own firm 10-Page Memo. We're part of the affiliate programs underneath the NorCal SBDC network. But first, let me just give a little quick overview of the SBDC network for those of you who may not be familiar. The California Small Business Development Center Network is the largest technical assistance program operating in the state of California, providing one-on-one support to small businesses in the areas of no-cost consulting and low-cost training. The Northern California SBDC represents 36 different counties, running from San Joaquin all the way up to Eureka. And like I mentioned, they provide that one-on-one critical support to small businesses. So if you know a small business owner who needs just great guidance, free consulting, training, please let us know. We're happy to support them. Let's jump to the next slide, Heidi. Just a few things that the SBDC specializes in. You'll see here, access to capital, research, business continuity, which encompasses everything related to disaster resiliency, growth plans, certification when it comes to procurement, and of course marketing at large. We like to say that we can provide you support with any number of different business situations, and we have the opportunity to leverage other networks if we ever need to bring any kind of specialized assistance for your businesses. Let's jump to the next slide. Now, for the work that we're doing underneath my firm and also 10-Page Memo is a specialized program focusing on regulatory assistance. We recognize that for many small business owners, there's a lot of confusion out there as far as how they should be responding effectively to new laws. There's a lot of concern about different bills that emerge, and it can be very, very difficult to navigate through the state and federal bureaucracy when it comes to understanding, what the heck am I supposed to do in order to be compliant and make sure my business is operating efficiently and in step with all the new laws that are out there. So what we did is we organized a new program, hired two great consultants that you'll hear from in just a bit, Leah and Jason, who are really helping us identify what are some crucial regulatory areas that we need to better inform business owners on and provide that critical one-on-one no-cost consulting too. And so you'll see here, what are we trying to do here? Comply with new state regs, help businesses avoid costly fines and other penalties, and in general help them to maintain their reputations and protect their bottom lines. The work we do includes one-on-one no-cost consulting and informational workshops. And let me turn it over now to my colleague and friend Sid Barakra to talk a little bit about what we're going to cover as part of today's webinar. and some of the specifics of our agenda for this afternoon. That's it.
Great, thanks, Jesse. Hi, everyone. My role today is just providing just a quick opening frame of what you're going to hear next from our colleagues, Jason Rankador and Leah Nitaki. And to just kind of like kick off this conversation, I want to first say to Heidi and Aurora, thank you very much for your partnership with CAMEO. And Heidi, thanks for sharing, you know, some of those new legislations that you just kind of shared at your opening. As for AB 377, the cottage chicken law, kitchen law, you know, I'm glad you discussed it, as it was legislation that was on our short list for discussion today, as was the California Consumer Privacy Act. And to our participants today, if you should reach out to Heidi and stay in touch on that one, because there is some cleanup language that's taking place in this legislative session around the California Consumer Privacy Act, because it is pretty broadly defined at the moment. And even though it is geared towards and targeting larger businesses, as Heidi shared, you know, there is currently the opening in the definition that those larger businesses could actually go down to their supply chain and be requesting or requiring their vendors to also be held accountable to the California Consumer Privacy Act. So stay tuned to that and stay in touch with Heidi. So let's jump to the next slide, please. So the focus areas that we ultimately landed on today that we're going to discuss are, as you will see, the SB3, the minimum wage increase. I'm sure just about everybody here is tracking the media coverage and knows that the wage increase is coming, but we just wanted to provide a little bit more granular data around it. New sexual harassment training and sexual harassment liability protections, as well as SB 142, which is a lactation accommodation that's going to be now moving forward in 2020 that businesses need to be aware of. And then we just thought it would be appropriate to share as potential coming down the pike SB 1221, which is a responsible beverage service. We thought that perhaps CAMEO members and stakeholders would like to know about it for your potential clients and those businesses that you're serving. So now moving, before we move on to Jason, I think we're going to do a couple polls. So
Yeah.
I'll turn it over to you.
I am going to launch a poll. If everybody could, how many, answer this question, how many employees do most of the businesses you work with have? Because those are going to be relevant to SB 778 and the minimum wage. Give everybody another minute or two to, not a minute, but maybe 10 more seconds to answer the poll. Great. It looks like most of, about 75% of you, most of you, are working with micro businesses, 1 to 5 employees, and a couple of you, 25% of you, are working with 5 to 25 employees. And now I am going to go to the other poll. How do you learn about new regulations? If you could answer that question. Trade associations, professional advisors, print or online, and other. All right. And most of you get your information from trade associations, and the other piece is print and online publications. So that's really important. We'll make sure that CAMEO keeps our website updated. And yep.
Thanks, Heidi, and thank
You're
you all
welcome.
for participating in those two polls. We have one more poll question at towards the end of the presentation. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jason Rankador, to begin the actual regulations conversation.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll be covering AB 2770, which is a change in sexual harassment liability protections. Next slide, please. This bill goes into effect, this went into effect this year. AB 2770 clarified some language on what can be shared about a former employee to a potential employer. The intent of this bill is to protect small businesses from, or any businesses from defamation lawsuits when asked whether or not they would rehire a former employee. Specifically, it has to do with an employee that was separated due to sexual harassment claims. In the past, if someone was terminated from their job due to sexual harassment, that employee, the employer was unable to disclose to any future employee, say for a reference check, why the person was let go or is no longer with the employer, or if if they would rehire them, because the employee could sue for defamation. So in theory, that kind of the theory behind the legislation is an individual could jump from job to job with no recourse for performing or having sexual harassment or sexually harassing former colleagues in their previous jobs. This bill does allow for former employers to disclose the sexual harassment as a reason that they would not rehire the individual on a reference check. So that have to be very specific. It cannot be done just because. It has to be based in fact, and it can't be done maliciously or out of revenge. Next slide, please. The next one is sexual harassment training. Next slide. SB 778 changed some of the provisions that was originally released in SB 1343 that was passed last year in 2018. It was determined that it would be prudent to provide additional education around sexual harassment in the workplace and extend the implementation deadline. It was originally supposed to go in line. This program 1343 was said that this program had to be online in starting January of 2020. They've provided an extension to 2021 as the state agency who has oversight. The Department of Fair Housing, Employment and Fair Housing were having some issues getting up to speed. The previous law stated that only businesses that had fewer than 50 employees were required to provide sexual harassment training to its supervisors only. This bill would require virtually all businesses are required to provide sexual harassment training to supervisor and new supervisor employees. For supervisors, they're required to do 2 hours of training, while non-supervisory employees are required to do 1 hour training within 6 months of hire. The Department of Fair Housing Employment and Fair Housing is required to create the training materials such as posters, online videos, and other training content per statute. This includes a poster disclosing the illegality of sexual harassment and promoting transgender rights. Businesses will be required to comply with the statute and keep records of the training or face quote unquote criminal action. Employers are also required to distribute information in a manner that all employees will receive it, for example, with their paychecks. I see this as being a potential issue as, a lot of people aren't necessarily receiving paychecks that much anymore. A lot of people are going to digital or, a direct deposit. So I'm sure we'll see some cleanup language around that. So any training that's done this year will be in compliance by 2021 because you're within that 2-year period, because it must be recertified every 2 years. So that's one thing that they also clarified. And then next slide. And I'm going to hand this over to my colleague, Leah, to cover this topic.
Great, thank you, Jason. Good afternoon, everybody. So SB 3 is a law that was passed back in 2016. Next slide, please. And it makes California businesses subject to an annual increase in the minimum wage so that all businesses are going to work their way up to $15 an hour minimum wage by the year 2022 or 2023. And exactly when depends on the size of the business. So if you take a look at the chart there on the slide, that is the minimum wage phase-in schedule. And take a look at the orange bar, and you can see that for smaller businesses, and that's those with 25 or fewer employees, they have slightly more time to work up to that $15 an hour level. So starting next January 1st, the minimum wage for businesses with 25 or fewer employers will be $12 an hour. And so that applies to, I think, most of the businesses that we all work with here. But for those businesses with 26 or more employees, the minimum wage starting on January 1st will be $13 an hour. And according to this, according to SB3, those rates will continue to increase by $1 per year until they hit the $15 an hour level. After that, the minimum wage will increase annually, and that's going to just be adjusted for inflation as measured by the Consumer Price Index, and it's going to be capped off at a maximum increase of 3.5% each year. So that's a general overview. There are some exemptions as well as some specific situations to keep in mind. And there are also situations where exceptions are not permitted. So a couple of examples of that. Employees may not agree to work for less than the minimum wage, and employers are not allowed to use an employee's tips as credit toward paying them the minimum wage. Next slide, please. So SB 142, in recent years, we've seen a number of bills that address privacy for nursing mothers in the workplace, or what's known as lactation accommodation. Next slide, please. And the most recent changes to those were passed through this year's bill, SB 142, and they take effect next January 1st. So the basic idea behind this law is that businesses should accommodate the needs of breastfeeding employees by providing them with an appropriate space and the time to do so. And this applies to both exempt and non-exempt workers. More specifically, employers have to provide a lactation room that is close to the employee's work area. It must be shielded from view and free from intrusion. And the room or location may include the place where the employee normally works, as long as it follows with specific room requirements. And that means the room should adhere to certain standards. It must be safe, clean, and accessible. In addition, the employee should have access to a nearby sink, as well as a refrigerator or some other cooling device, such as a cooler for storing the milk. Lactation breaks should be taken during the employee's regular rest and meal breaks if possible. But in the case where they do need additional time, employers are required now to allow for this, although they're not required to compensate for that additional time. Something else that's new with this year's bill is that employers are also required to develop and implement a policy for lactation accommodation. So that's something that a lot of businesses are going to be scrambling to pull together. And employees should have access to this policy upon their hiring and also upon request. Now, if there are any financial or space limitations, a temporary space may be provided, but it still has to meet the room requirements. And it's also really important that this temporary space is not a bathroom or a toilet stall. And if complying with these requirements would be an undue hardship for the business, an undue hardship can be something that causes the employer significant difficulty or expense, then they do have the option to apply for an exemption, but they can only apply for an exemption if the business has fewer than 50 employees. And finally, employers that are in violation with SB 142 with this new law are subject to a $100 civil penalty for each day that the employee is denied a reasonable break time or an adequate space for lactation purposes. So that's just a general overview of the new lactation accommodation policy. And Jason, I'll pass it back over to you.
Before I go to Jason, I have a question, Leah.
Yeah, sure.
So this applies to all employers, and only small businesses can get an exemption. Do you know how hard it is to get an exemption?
I'm not sure how hard it is, but I know that, like I said, it's only if you have 50 or fewer employees. And our understanding as well, and we can clarify this, but the temporary or the space will not have to be available unless the request is made, but the policy does have to be outlined.
Got it.
And I believe that if you want to request an exemption, you can do that through the Labor Commissioner's office.
And we can help clients with that, Heidi.
Great. So we should send people to you guys.
Yes.
Awesome.
So this is a pending regulation. AB 1221 was passed earlier this year, signed by the governor. And so now the Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control is in the process of rolling out these regulations as we speak. Next slide, please. AB 1221 requires the Alcohol Beverage Control Act to be administered by the Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control that regulates the granting of licenses for manufacture, distribution, and sale of alcoholic beverages within the state. Under the existing law, it requires that any place where consumption of the alcohol is sold or is consumed on premises, that it will now require people to be certified as servers. In the past, these programs like RBS, which has already been in existence, but it was a voluntary program that local governments could require, but the state did not require. There was another program called LEAD, which is also voluntary, that could also be mandated by local governments, or business can go about, could go through the process themselves if they chose to. However, under AB 1221, effective July 1st, 2021, it will be mandatory that all individuals serving alcohol beverages complete RBS training. So that is not just a supervisor or one person within the business having that certification. Every single person that will be serving alcohol is required to provide, go through this training. This is projected to impact approximately 1 million servers within the state. The recent numbers from ABC projects that it will impact 56,000 businesses, which an estimated 33% of them are small businesses. So this will have a huge impact on a lot of, restaurants, bars, clubs. It also has impacts on people who have like nonprofits who have like a wine tasting. It impacts all of it. On or before January 1st, 2020, ABC is to develop and implement and administer a curriculum for RBS training program. They're currently in the process of that. They are responding to public comment questions, which wrapped up in early November. They're accumulating their responses for that. Anyone who is currently certified as an RBS trainer must get recertified. So it's not grandfathering anyone in. It's just going to do a brand new refresh. Everyone's going to have to get recertified on that. RBS, it will require, it just ensures that servers and their managers of alcoholic beverages are educated on the dangers of serving alcohol to minors and over-serving alcohol to patrons with the intention of reducing alcohol-related harm to local communities. As part of this, enforcement of AB 1221 will begin on September 1st, 2021. So they're given a little bit of time for people to get ramped up. People must be certified within 60 days of their employment. This includes, but is not limited to, restaurants, as I said before, bars, fast casual dining, tasting rooms, hotels, and stadiums. They are required to check the customer's identification. They are also required to take customers' alcoholic beverage orders and pour alcoholic beverages for customers and deliver the beverages to the customers. It includes all 4 of those activities. As I stated before, for events that require a daily license, this is where there's an exception. It will require that only one person is required to have that certification. The person is identified on the one-day application as being RBS certified, and the certified person must remain on site through the duration of the event. So you can't have Jason Rankador be certified as RBS. I'm just there in the morning and then I take off and I'm not there. The person's required to be on site the entire time. Additionally, the RBS trained and certified persons must actively monitor the service of alcoholic beverages to guests at the event and have created policies for the event that the mandate and foster responsibility for alcoholic beverage service. So there's a little bit more to just being that person that has the clean license and has to be there. Can't go, go into the back and just hang out. You have to be monitoring the situation the entire time. This is a continually evolving program. The regulations have been posted with the Office of Administrative Law. And so we anticipate that they'll continue just to evolve. And we also speculate that there'll be continued tweaks to the program, perhaps legislatively. And I'll pass the ball back to, I believe, Jesse or Sid.
Thanks, Jason. I think we're going to turn it over to Heidi to do one more poll question first.
Sure. Let's see. Our last poll question, the one that we haven't done, is this one. What are your client's biggest challenges related to regulatory compliance? Lack of time, staff is busy running the business. Lack of clear information. Is it hard to understand, keep up with changing laws? You can vote for as many as you have. And the cost of making the adjustment, what is that one? Or other. So I'll give another, there's 5, 6, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'm going to end the polling here. Everybody said cost was a huge challenge. All three of them were big challenges: lack of time, lack of clear information, and other. If the person who answered other wants to type the other in, I would be curious to know as to what that is. What that might be. So, and with that, I am gonna close the polling and turn it over to Jesse to field questions. I'm also going to I'm gonna allow all the attendees to talk. You will still be muted. Let's see. So you would need to unmute yourself if you would like to talk. Questions and or there's one person who doesn't have, who's using an older version of Zoom, so cannot talk. So that's Susanna. You'll have to type your questions into chat. So everybody's, the attendees are all able to talk if they unmute themselves. I did have a question on this beverage thing, Jason, and that is, you mentioned something very casually, and this worries me as a nonprofit, is when I have an event, and I serve alcohol, I hire someone to serve alcohol, they have to have this certification, not me, right? Or is it me?
Yeah, correct. It's the people who are serving the alcohol.
Okay.
So if you hire a caterer or a third party, it's their requirement to make sure that they're certified. However, I would caution that with this coming up in 2021, you would start asking that question. Are you RBS certified as you're going through your procurement process?
Got it. So if we have an event, we make sure that we get that. Yeah. That's a good point. I see Star has unmuted herself, so I'm going to call on her.
I didn't really have any questions right now other than, can we get a copy of the slides?
Absolutely.
Great.
Yes, absolutely. I should have mentioned that at the beginning. And I think, Chuck, were you going to ask a question you had?
No, I was just playing around with the mute, unmute, but I was a guy that answered other on the last poll question, and there's a lot of regulations coming down on small businesses, and it's the not only the cost but the implementation of it. I think alcohol one, for example, I think it was mentioned that have to have a certified person on site on the floor all the time, right?
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's with the turnover and so forth with personnel. I mean that that's going to be, a difficult and expensive proposition for a lot of small businesses, coupled with all these other regulations coming on them. So it's, the environment's getting tricky.
Yeah, Jason, do you have any sense as to what that certification is going to look like? Is it like an online class that someone's going to have to take? Is it a test they're going to have to take?
So so there's going to be an online, it's required to have an online form, but you could also hire, say, a contractor or a trainer to come in and train. So the legislation requires, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, it's a pretty nominal amount that's allowed to be charged for the training for each employee. So while it does have a little bit of a cost to it, it's supposed to be pretty nominal. Actually, I'm looking it up right now. It says ongoing cost to the individual, it's about $89. So while it's not earth-shattering, that still can be pretty significant, especially if you have a pretty large operation.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody have any other any questions or comments for Jesse and his team, or know about any other regulations that we didn't cover that you might want to learn more about, or we can go in that direction?
Hey Heidi, let me jump in real quick.
Yeah.
This is Jesse. Eric, for all of you on the webinar, we know that there's many regulations and a lot of different laws to better understand. This was our, for this particular presentation, we actually did an informal straw poll of a number of different restaurants, retail stores, and associations to get a sense of what was keeping them up at night. But if there are other things that are keeping you up at night that you would like to have additional support on, we would definitely be very interested in understand what those laws, regulations are. And just so you know, for your clients, our team is here to help them better understand, okay, what is the impact of those regulations upon their business, to help them do that analysis and really figure out how they're going to, essentially adjust their business plan in order to accommodate those new compliance rules. So I just wanted to add that in.
Jesse, is it okay if I put I know we're going to show your email, but is it okay if I put into chat so people can cut and paste?
Yeah, of course.
Oops, that didn't work. It's jesse.torres
@arroyowest.com.
Get it right? Anybody can unmute themselves if they want to. The other thing I'd be curious to know if there's anything that any policy goal that you want CAMEO to consider over the next year. We had a policy committee meeting that Jesse happens to chair as well, and we talked a bunch about what we're looking at doing for next year. So if there's anything, or if you've been hearing, or that your organization is working on, I'd be curious to know what that is. You can either type it in or not, or if nobody's doing anything, that's fine too. And we'll let you know what our policy slate looks like next year, in the beginning of the year, once we finalize it. Well, Jesse, do you want to say anything else?
Just, again, thank you so much, Heidi. Thank you for all of you who spent the last 45 minutes with us and with our team. This is a new program. We are definitely, interested in hearing back from you as far as there's any specific regulations or laws that we should be taking a look at, things that could better help your businesses that you're supporting. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll play the role of the primary contact. But on behalf of our team, we're just so thankful for your time, and Heidi, to CAMEO for your support.
Thanks, Jesse. Oh, I'm gonna mute you. Sorry, I muted you, Jesse. You can unmute yourself if you want to say one final thing. But we did have somebody type into chat that they're interested in finding out more about the independent contractor versus employee laws in California. Absolutely, so stay tuned for that. I'll make sure to take a special note. And there's lots of work being done on that. I think we're going to see a lot of bills come out this year on cleanup bills. I wanted to just let everybody know about two different programs that we have coming up. Our next webinar is going to be on tech tools for TA. We spent a lot of time doing tech tools for lending. This January, we're going to start looking at some tech tools for TA. SAMA School has a new virtual program class that they deliver for gig workers, for these independent contractors. So we're going to be working with them on that, which we're making available to you for free. And it's basically going to be, they'll do all the work and you can get all the credit, and you can learn more about that on January 16th. And then we're also going to present Growth Wheel. They're going to do a demo. Growth Wheel is a technical assistance tool that I know a lot of the SBDCs might be familiar with. They go to all the different conferences, but it's kind of expensive from what I've heard from on the ground. We're looking to do a possible aggregated model with them, so it help with some cost sharing and aggregating people together. So that could be really interesting. And I typed that registration into that's the Zoom link that I typed into the chat right now. And then our next, the other piece I want to just make sure that everybody knows about is our in-demand micro lending essentials class. I posted in on OFN's opportunity finance class last week, and have gotten several several people interested in it, like half a dozen just in one posting. Is our microlending essentials class. It's January 22nd to 23rd. It's in San Francisco. It's in person. It's a 2-day class taught by Susan Brown. She's a great trainer. She only gets better. It's hands-on how to basically do a credit memo, even for business assistance providers, anybody who's doing loan packaging. It will help clients do better and get their clients more access to capital. Great. And anyway, so if anybody's interested in those classes and want more information, you can email me or just sign up. And I want to thank our awesome panelists, Jesse and Sid, their team, Leah and Jason. Thank you all for attending. I really appreciate your time. I'm going to give you 10 minutes back of your afternoon, and have a wonderful holiday season, and we will see you in 2020. Thanks, everyone.